Lebanon's electric shock to the system. The government hasn't been able to keep the lights on since the civil war, and power cuts and subsidies have devastated the economy. But the energy minister now has a plan to spark things back to life. I'm Raymond Ghajar, and today's newsmaker is Lebanon's electricity crisis. If you've experienced a power cut, you know just how frustrating they can be. So spare a thought for Lebanon, where they're an almost daily occurrence and can last up to 14 hours. There, it's not just an inconvenience to people's daily lives, it's a massive strain on the economy. Every year, Beirut spends billions of dollars more than the country brings in, and a large portion of the budget is used to prop up the electricity sector. For decades, the government has promised to get things back on track and provide people with round-the-clock power. The energy minister appointed earlier this year says she can now succeed where her predecessors have failed. Nada Bustani wants to build new power plants, shut down old ones, and move towards renewable energy. But is her plan feasible? That debate in a moment. But first, Imogen Kimber has this report.
30 years since the civil war, which devastated Lebanon's infrastructure, the capital still struggles with daily power outages. Elsewhere in the country, it's even worse. Beyond the blackouts stalling Beirut's businesses, paying for the electricity Lebanon actually has is one of the major causes of its chronic economic crisis.
The Lebanese state is losing in the electricity sector a lot. Electricity is a disaster for the Lebanese government. It's an open wound they cannot close.
Subsidizing Electricité du Liban, the national electric company, is costing the government over $1 billion per year. Since 1995, the subsidies have added up to $35 billion. That means electricity accounts for almost half of Lebanon's $85 billion of public debt, according to the IMF.
The National Economic Plan is based on the leverage of this sector. We are all partners in the future of our country. And if we will fail, then we are all failing. And if we succeed, then all will be successful.
The new Minister of Energy and Water, Nada Bustani, is hoping to solve both the electricity shortage and the economic crisis. Bustani plans to build new power plants, shut down inefficient old ones, utilize renewable energy, and finalize negotiations with neighboring countries to access gas in the Mediterranean Sea. Ultimately, providing 24-hour electricity for less cost, reducing public spending and debt, and allowing for an increase in productivity. But where the government is hoping Bustani will succeed, others have failed, including her colleagues in the Free Patriotic Movement, Gibran Bassil and Caesar Abi Khalil, who collectively held the same post for over 7 years. It may be the notorious sectarianism, political division, and corruption in Lebanon that proves the biggest obstacle. When this floating Turkish power plant was brought to dock, the Amal movement objected that it was a short-term solution. Political opposition to the Amal movement said their motivation was, in fact, to protect the private generator mafia. But after years of waiting for change, these protesters aren't confident improvements will come soon.
It's the same warlords in power, and they've been breaking the same promises since 1992 on 24-hour electricity and water. And now the economy and the collapse of the pound, there are hundreds of crises. We're fed up. The people must rise up.
So, can Bustani reform the electricity sector before the economic crisis worsens and tips Lebanon off the fiscal cliff? Imogen Kimber, The Newsmakers.
Let's go to Beirut now, where we're joined by Raymond Ghajar. He's an advisor to Lebanon's Ministry of Energy and Water, as well as a professor of electrical engineering at the Lebanese American University. Hala Bejjani is the managing director of Kulluna Irada, a group which advocates for political reform and government transparency. And in Bangkok is energy consultant Jessica Obeid. She was the chief energy engineer for the UN Development Program in Beirut. Good to have you all on the program. Raymond, what makes you so confident that this can be done? 24/7 electricity by the year 2020. Very ambitious by the government. After 30 years of failure, why should people believe you now?
Well, providing electricity is not really rocket science. I mean, it's basic science. What's different about this current plan is that the government has finally come to the convinced, if you like, that if you want to provide electricity quickly, you need to merge the short-term or the temporary solution with the long-term solution in order to allow these diesel generators that are very expensive to come out the grid and give the consumer an opportunity to pay one bill that is less than the sum of the two bills that they currently pay for Électricité du Liban, which is the national electric utility, and a private diesel generator. And because of economies of scale, obviously we can generate power cheaper than these small, inefficient at times, and definitely polluting and very expensive because they run on diesel fuel. So if the political will is there, we already have all the technical problems identified, and we have proposed solutions. And some of these solutions that we propose have already been implemented, like completion of the loop of the 220 kV, reduction of some substantial non-technical losses, and collection of arrears. So
right.
in a space of 6 months, we have already accomplished quite a bit, even exceeded the target we have set for ourselves.
Okay, so Hala, Raymond has laid out the case for why everybody should be optimistic. And he's saying that the government's finally woken up to the reality. It's not rocket science and they're doing it. Do you believe them?
Well, I have to first admit that what the Minister of Energy has been doing during the last 6 months, as Raymond has said, is new to Lebanon, which is the Mansouriya loop, which is looking a little bit at the distribution and collection. And we have to admit that Minister Bustani has an energy that has been contagious. However, unfortunately, I would say as an organization that has been invited to CEDRE as a representative of the civil society, that I do not see any change on the major commitments that the government had taken. And if I can quickly remind what are these commitments, we talked about structural reforms in CEDRE. We committed to structural reforms, and this means better public investment, improved procurement procedures. We committed to sectorial reforms in the electricity sector, and this meant namely committing to a regulatory body and to a better board at EDL. And last, to fiscal adjustments, and that meant reducing the subsidies that EDL is benefiting from, and that amount to actually $2 billion.
Right.
And so if I want to take each of those, actually the government has not moved on any of them.
Okay.
Not only we do not have a better procurement environment, on the contrary, we've blurred it with passing laws that are very much cherry-picked. And if I am an international investor, I would look twice at my security in investing in Lebanon. The sectorial reform with the regulatory authority is not moving, and we know for sure that the government is not at all interested in setting a regulatory authority. We are not either if it's going to be an only dress-up regulatory authority. We're interested in a real, independent, powerful, and with a budget regulatory authority.
Okay.
And last, on the fiscal adjustment, we're supposed to stop the subventions. I would like to say one last, and we're not moving into that direction. Beirut gets already 21 hours, and this is where the main consumers are. Why don't we start the plan with stopping the subvention for the Beirut residents, which account for a very large number? And last but not least, in the electricity plan that has been presented, we were not presented with any kind of financial projections which link the plan to the fiscal adjustment. So We don't know. We have to believe the government on what they say, but we would like to get some numbers in order to be able to participate in this conversation, and we do not get these numbers. And last, we're not convinced that the temporary solution mixed with the long-term solution is what Lebanon needs in the midst of a financial crisis, because Lebanon needs to be competitive on the very long run after the economic crisis is through.
Okay,
And we need to have
Hala, I want to get the
competitive
other.
companies,
I want to
and
get
the
the other
short-term and
two
long-term
guests here.
solutions are very costly.
Fair enough, Hala, and you've listed
Sure.
a whole lot of reasons why Lebanese people should be skeptical here. Jessica, it's hard to believe that there was a lack of technical knowledge up until this point, up until Nada Bustani made her suggestions and her proposals, and everybody sort of came on board and said, we're going to get 24/7 electricity soon. Was the paralysis and the power cuts because of a politically dysfunctional state, no more, no less?
Of course, so everyone knows that it's not a technical issue. As Dr. Ghajar has stated, it's not rocket science, and Lebanon is not inventing power plants. However, we haven't seen political will in the past decades, unfortunately. And sadly, we only see political will and reforms, hopefully, if we see them in Lebanon, when the economy is in such a big crisis. So that means that the business investment climate is very weak, which triggers its own challenges.
Right. Raymond Ghajar, fuel prices go higher and higher.
But also when
okay, go ahead, Jessica. Finish your point. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that it's not the dysfunctioning of the electricity sector in Lebanon is not an island by itself just for the power sector, but it's a result of the political system in Lebanon that has in some way safeguarded power sharing, but it has hindered any kind of political reforms.
Okay, and we're going to expand on that in a few moments, but I want to kind of go back to the restlessness on the streets, right? Raymond, people are protesting. Fuel prices are getting higher and higher. There's a gas station boycott and so on, these strikes, right? Is there a genuine fear within the government that this could get out of hand, and that's why the government has to act imminently, because the protest movement also seems to be growing?
Well, definitely, as if we don't do anything, I mean, just take a normal system that you have, a normal electric system. Our systems are decaying, they're becoming older and less efficient and less capable, and the demand is growing. That means we have, gradually, we are decreasing the number of service hours that we're providing to our consumers. To give you an idea, consumer pays 9 cents, 9.58 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity supplied by the government, and pays anywhere between 28 to 30 to 40, 35 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity that he gets from the private diesel generator. So as we provide them with less, they have to pay more, So a consumer that gets, say, 50% of the time electricity from EDL may pay $100 and pay equivalently $300 or $400 for the private diesel generator. And as a result, okay, they're either not paying for the government provided electricity, so they're stealing, or they're not paying, okay, and they're getting frustrated because they can't get enough and they can't get the quality of electricity from the private diesel generator. So they're venting off their frustration on the street, and that could eventually play politically against, the decision makers, the politicians. They want to keep them at bay in a sense, but at the same time, and that I challenge the listeners here. We cannot simply raise tariff to reduce subsidies. We can today. I can say, okay, if I want to eliminate tariff, I would have to raise the electricity tariff.
Right.
I would have to raise the tariff by, let's say, 70 or 80%. Meanwhile, the other bill, the diesel bill, is still the same. So here I'm telling the consumer, the Lebanese consumer, to pay 2 or 3 times more for the electricity from the Lebanese government and still keep the same diesel generator bill. What we're saying, the only way we can do this, and this is a government decision, and that makes economic sense according to the World Bank and the IMF as well. You cannot raise tariff unless you improve service. Now, we cannot improve service instantaneously. You can ask any provider, any contractor around the world, building an efficient gas, fired power plant takes anywhere from 18 to 36 months.
Right.
If
Okay.
every year we lose, sorry, go ahead.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about a plan, and you need some time in order to get this plan in motion, right? But Lebanon is no normal country in that respect. And I want to go to Hala here, because people say, when you want to try to get things done, traditionally you have multiple camps. And so you can't really say that there's political will that's uniformly across the government, because you have different facets of government pulling at different ends of the rope, usually reliant on benefactors. On the one hand, you have some of the government relying on Saudi benefactors, other parts of the government relying on Iranian benefactors and people associated with them. So it's actually very difficult, even if you have good intentions to get things done, because the political system is broken. Is that how you see it?
Well, yes and no, which means that definitely this is how the system has been functioning, and that money was flowing from various state benefactors, as you call them, seeking for influence inside Lebanon, political influence. But the money is drafting now. I mean, Saudi Arabia is very much busy in internal affairs. Iran is also very busy with the American grip on its business, and I think that money inflows have become very scarce, and that's why actually the economic crisis also is precipitating, because instead of inflows, we're having outflows in our economy. So maybe this will be an opportunity for our political class to sense the urgency of taking the right decisions. And I want to be hopeful here that they are really aware that there is a sense of urgency because our economy is collapsing. However, I do not share the perspective. Lebanon has waited, the Lebanese citizen has waited for 25 years for electricity, and it has cost us a huge amount of debt. I don't think we should ask for an urgent solution now. We should ask for the best solution possible. And the best solution possible is the best solution environmentally, the best solution for the citizen on the level of the price, and the best solution for the competition of, again, an economy that will need to be competitive in its environment. So while I agree that we need to move fast, I don't want to move fast at any cost, because the citizen is not responsible of this dreadlock in electricity for the last 25 years and should not pay the price of it.
Yeah, Jessica, Obeid, as we heard in Imogen's report in the build-up to this discussion, when there was the floating generator from Turkey, you had the Amal movement saying this is not going to work. When people suggested privatization, Walid Jumblat, the former MP, said, well, be careful, privatization will just enrich the few. Be careful. In trying to find solutions, we're going to have a repeat of the old problems. People are going to enrich themselves, they're going to line their pockets, and it's going to be business as usual. Are they right that within the solutions, you're still going to have a continuation of a current system?
It's not a matter of which solution would prevail and if it's a power barges or not, and if it's privatization. I also share, I personally am not in favor of privatization. It has not worked in countries that have similar context like Lebanon. Privatization by itself is just changing management from the state to the private sector, which does not necessarily mean that it's going to improve the performance of the service. The current plan relies on public-private participation, and that's the best way forward. However, there are several challenges that the government needs to mitigate, especially now that the business climate is very weak. Attracting investment is very tough for Lebanon, but also that comes with a high-risk premium and the high cost for debt servicing, which the government should account for. So we're launching these tenders sadly at a very critical time phase. Yeah. And a very high risk of default as well.
Right. So Raymond, is this the litmus test? If you can get this right, Is it then the message to the IMF? Is it the message to the World Bank? Is it the message to everybody that Lebanon can sort itself out? And the example is the electricity crisis was ended properly and smoothly. Now we're open for business and you can invest in our country. Is that how you see it?
Well, we certainly hope so. We have the World Bank and the IFC with us every step of the way. I mean, in the implementation of the initiatives of our plan, the IMF and the World Bank are actually reviewing everything we do. And of course, they have made substantial and very useful recommendations which were incorporated. And I can happily tell you that we have no objection from the World Bank from a procurement perspective about the quality of the documents that we have prepared. Of course, we're still making improvement, and now they're in discussion with the ministerial committee, and they will go to the Directorate of Public Tender, and they will also have some more comments. We are doing everything as transparently as possible, and we're willing to learn, but at the end, time is of the essence. It doesn't mean shortcutting or taking shortcuts. I think this is, we have seen, I have personally seen tenders floated internationally in Canada, US, in Jordan and Saudi Arabia, and even in Germany. And, because of the issues of transparency that the Lebanese government has faced, we have to be doubly as transparent as someone else who's got credibility, got to do. So we're trying, very seriously and hard to make this a success. And I think if this is successful, I can tell you this is probably, for me personally, it's one of the most difficult tenders I have ever participated in because of the elements in the tender, because of the environment that we have, and because Lebanon is, has some very serious financial problems. So we have to make adjustments to the tender in order to attract international investors who are being asked to invest hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in a country that has some difficulty paying but has zero defaults so far. So we're crossing our fingers.
Right, Jessica, Obeid, to the issue of trust. A lot of people in Martyrs Square protesting, saying we don't trust this government. And then they say, well, the government says it's short of cash, but we read in the newspapers that Saad al-Hariri paid a South African bikini model $16 million in 2013, right? We're not short of money there, right? So there seems to be this general lack of trust in the men in suits being able to use that money to good effect. Is that warranted, and what will it take for this government to restore trust?
Thank you for asking me this, because I wanted to comment on this the minute you've asked about international donors and international finance institutions. So these are being involved. However, the Lebanese citizens have never been consulted on any sector, in any decision-making process, and these citizens are key in the success of this plan, especially that the economic situation is very bad, and we're going to hike the tariff soon. So consultation with the public sector, communication plans, with the citizens, communication plans for the citizens are something we haven't seen. All the details should be communicated to the citizens of Lebanon. And I've personally, the day the policy paper was launched, I ran a small survey on my own social media channels, and I've asked about that trust level. And more than 80% have responded that they do not believe that they're going to get electricity anytime soon. So we need to have the alignments of all the citizens, and this should be a core focus of the Ministry of Energy as well.
Jessica, Hala, and Raymond, we're out of time, but I want to thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers.
Look, there has been a slight increase recently. That could be down to a number of factors that include Australia's domestic political situation in early May, we had an election. Obviously, the tragic Easter bombings here may have played a factor, but there are also a whole bunch of unknowns as to why people would be seeking to come to Australia illegally by boat. I'd like to re-emphasise that Australia's border is closed to illegal people smuggling and that there is zero chance of success.
Well, that's all for this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Raymond Ghajar. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.